I bought my first house when I was 24. It wasn't anything special from the outside. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, quiet street, a place that felt safe enough for someone fresh out of college with a steady job and no idea how fragile that sense of safety really was. The realtor mentioned the basement like it was a bonus. Very spacious, she said. Lots of storage potential. She didn't mention how strange it was. The basement wasn't one open space. The previous owners had divided it using plywood walls and exposed wooden frames, creating a series of connected rooms. From the bottom of the stairs, the layout branched off in different directions. A laundry area to the left, a workshop-like space straight ahead, and farther back, beyond a narrow passage, a large storage room that always felt wrong. You couldn't see the entire basement from any single spot. At the time, I thought that was kinda cool. Like a secret level in a video game. I only ever went down there to do laundry. That night, about 8 months after I moved in, it was a weeknight. Tuesday, I think. I remember because I had work early the next morning and almost decided to leave the laundry for the weekend. I didn't. I came home, dropped my bag by the door, and grabbed the basket. As I passed the basement door, I noticed something strange. The light was already on. I stood there for a moment, staring down the stairs. The glow was dim and yellow, the old incandescent bulbs casting long shadows along the walls. I told myself I must have forgotten to turn them off last time. I wish I'd trusted the part of my brain that hesitated. The air changed as soon as I stepped onto the stairs. Basements always smell different, but this felt heavier, like the space had been closed up for too long. The wooden steps creaked beneath my feet as I descended. At the bottom, I turned toward the laundry area. That's when I saw movement, just a flicker in my peripheral vision, something dark shifting where it shouldn't have been. I turned my head without thinking, and froze. There was a man crouched behind one of the folding tables near the far corner of the basement. For a moment, my brain refused to accept it. The image didn't make sense. It felt like seeing a glitch in reality. A stranger was hiding in my basement. He was filthy. His clothes looked soaked and stained, like he'd been sleeping outdoors. His hair was matted, his face partially hidden by shadow, but his eyes were clear, and they were locked onto mine. Neither of us moved. The silence stretched so long that my arms began to shake, the laundry basket slipping slightly in my grip. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my body wouldn't respond. Then he stood up. The movement was sudden, violent. He didn't come toward me. He ran deeper into the basement. The sound of his footsteps snapping against concrete snapped me out of my paralysis. I took a step back, then another, my heel scraping against the floor as I turned toward the stairs. That's when the lights went out. Not flickered, not dimmed. They were gone. The basement was swallowed by darkness so complete it felt solid, like I could reach out and touch it. I'd never been down there without the lights on. I hadn't realized how little natural light reached that space. I kept moving, convinced I knew where the stairs were. I was wrong. My foot caught on something, maybe the edge of a rug or a low shelf, and I went down hard. The basket flew from my hands, clothes scattering across the floor. I hit my shoulder, then my head. When I pushed myself up, I had no idea where I was. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might drown out everything else. I reached for my phone, only to remember I'd left it upstairs on the kitchen counter. That's when I screamed. I don't know why. Panic, probably. Some desperate hope that noise would scare him away. Instead, someone screamed back. The sound came from the far side of the basement. It wasn't human in the way I expected. It was raw, unhinged, filled with rage. He sounded like someone who wanted to kill. I screamed again, my voice breaking. He screamed again, louder. Then I stopped, and so did he. The silence afterward was worse than the screaming. I could hear my own breathing, sharp and uneven. Somewhere in the dark, something moved. I dropped to my hands and knees and started crawling. I felt along the concrete floor, the rough walls, anything familiar. I tried to picture the layout in my head, but fear had erased it. Behind me, footsteps echoed softly. He was moving too. The sound followed my path, matching my pace. I realized, with sick certainty, that he knew this basement better than I did. I felt breath against my neck. Not touching, just close enough. I lurched forward, nearly sobbing as my hand brushed against something wooden. The stairs. I grabbed the railing and pulled myself up, taking the steps two at a time. I made it to the second step. Something grabbed my ankle. I screamed as my grip slipped. My head struck the railing, sending a burst of pain through my skull as I fell backward. I hit the floor hard, the air forced from my lungs. Hands closed around my legs, strong hands, stronger than they should have been. He dragged me away from the stairs. I kicked wildly, my heel connecting with something solid. He grunted, his grip loosening just enough for me to twist free. I scrambled, blind and desperate, feeling the walls until I found the stairs again. He screamed. I didn't look back. I ran. I burst through the basement door and slammed it shut behind me. The door didn't have a lock. I threw my weight against it just as something slammed into the other side. Once, twice. The door bowed inward, wood creaking under the impact. I dug my feet into the floor, pulling off my socks to get better traction. Another hit. The door flew open an inch before I forced it shut again. My arms burned, my legs shook. I was crying openly now, begging my body not to fail me. After what felt like hours, the impacts stopped. Footsteps retreated down the stairs. I ran for my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it dialing 911. When the police arrived, the basement was empty. One of the windows had been forced open from the outside. Nothing was stolen. The officer looked at me carefully and said something I'll never forget. He may have been living down there. I moved out 4 months later. I still think about the way he screamed back at me, and how ready he was to finish it. The police stayed for nearly an hour. 2 officers searched every corner of the basement, while a third sat with me in the kitchen, asking questions I struggled to answer. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every time there was a noise outside, my heart jumped. They found the window easily. It was one of the small ground-level ones near the back of the house, hidden behind a line of overgrown bushes I'd never bothered trimming. The latch had been bent inward, metal warped like it had been forced again and again. One of the officers pointed out something else. There were footprints in the dust along the concrete floor, bare footprints. They led from the window into the maze of rooms, then disappeared in several different directions, overlapping each other like the person had been pacing for a long time. He knew where everything was, the officer said quietly. That light switch isn't easy to find. He was right. The basement light switch wasn't near the stairs like most houses. It was tucked behind one of the plywood partitions, halfway down the room. Even I sometimes had to fumble for it. Whoever that man was, he'd known exactly where to go. When they finally left, they suggested I stay with a friend for the night. I told them I'd be fine. I wasn't. I didn't sleep at all. I sat on the couch with every light in the house on, replaying the night over and over in my head. The sounds, the darkness, the weight of his hands around my ankle. The worst part was the screaming. Not the noise itself, but the timing, the way he stopped when I stopped. He wasn't trying to scare me away. He was communicating. The next morning, I took off work. I went back into the basement in daylight, something I wasn't sure I'd ever be able to do again. With the sun coming through the small windows, it looked almost normal. Almost. That's when I noticed the signs I'd missed before. One of the storage rooms in the back smelled wrong, not like mildew or old cardboard. It smelled lived in. There were flattened boxes pushed against the wall like a makeshift bed. A stained blanket folded in the corner. Someone had been sleeping there. I found empty water bottles stuffed behind a shelf. Food wrappers tucked inside a paint can. A candle burned down to a stub. My basement hadn't just been invaded. It had been occupied. I called the police again, and this time they took pictures. They said it wasn't uncommon. Sometimes people found places like this and stayed hidden for weeks, months. That should have made me feel better. It didn't, because I realized something else. He hadn't panicked when he saw me. He'd already decided what to do. Over the next few weeks, I tried to pretend life was normal. I replaced the window latch. I installed better locks. I even bought a cheap security camera for the basement stairs, though I hated looking at the footage. Every creak at night sounded like footsteps. Every shadow felt wrong. I started avoiding the basement completely. I took my laundry to a laundromat across town. Friends noticed I was jumpy, distant. I didn't tell them why. Saying it out loud made it feel real in a way I wasn't ready for. About 2 months after the incident, something happened that finally broke me. I came home late one night and noticed the basement light was on again. My heart dropped into my stomach. I stood at the top of the stairs listening. The camera app was open on my phone, my thumb hovering over the call button. The house was silent. Slowly, I reached down and turned the light off. Nothing happened. No footsteps, no screaming. But when I checked the camera footage later, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The light hadn't turned on by itself. It turned on at 3:12 a.m. The camera caught movement just out of frame. A shadow passed across the bottom of the stairs, lingered for a few seconds, then disappeared. The police said the camera probably glitched. I knew better. That was the moment I decided to move. 4 months after the night in the basement, I packed my things and left. I didn't tell the new owners what had happened. I couldn't bring myself to. Sometimes late at night, I still think about him, about how easily he navigated the darkness, about how close he came to dragging me away from the stairs, and I wonder something that still makes my skin crawl. If I hadn't fought back, if I hadn't screamed, would anyone have ever known I was down there with him? This happened when I was 14. I'm in my 30s now, which means I've had plenty of time to replay that weekend in my head. Plenty of time to convince myself it wasn't as bad as it felt. It never works. My parents were going out of state for a wedding, just 2 nights. They didn't want to leave me alone, even though I was technically old enough, so the plan was for my older sister to stay with me. She texted me less than 10 minutes after they pulled out of the driveway. Something came up. "I'm not coming." I remember staring at the message for a long time, waiting for another one to follow it. An explanation, an apology, anything. Nothing came. I didn't tell my parents. Part of me didn't want to stress them out. Another part of me didn't want a babysitter. Our house wasn't scary. It was a 2-story place in a quiet suburban neighborhood, surrounded by families who had lived there for years. Nothing bad ever happened on our street. That's what I told myself as I settled onto the couch that night. I spent hours playing video games, eating junk food I wasn't usually allowed to have. By midnight, the house felt different. Not dangerous, just empty. That's when I heard the tapping. It was faint, like something lightly knocking against the siding. I assumed it was a tree branch or maybe debris blown by the wind. It happened once, then stopped. A few minutes later, it happened again. Same rhythm, same sound. Then it started moving. The tapping traveled along the side of the house, slow and deliberate, like fingers dragging across the walls. I muted the TV and sat perfectly still, listening. Silence. After a minute, I convinced myself I was being paranoid. I turned the TV back on and tried to focus on the game. 20 minutes later, I heard it again. This time, it came from below me, the basement. The sound echoed upward, muffled but unmistakable. A light repeated tapping against glass. Our basement was unfinished. Concrete floor, exposed beams, a small kitchenette in the corner. There were windows down there, right at ground level, leading outside. I told myself it was an animal. I stood up slowly and walked toward the basement door. My hand rested on the knob longer than it should have. I opened it. From the top of the stairs, I stared down into the darkness. The tapping was louder now, spaced out every few seconds. "Hello?" I called out. The tapping stopped instantly. My stomach dropped. If it had been an animal, it wouldn't have reacted like that. The light switch was at the bottom of the stairs. There was no chance I was going down there. Instead, I closed the door until it was barely open and stuck my arm through. I held my phone over the gap, turned on the flashlight, and recorded a video with my eyes closed. 5 seconds. That's all I could manage. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and leaned against it, breathing hard. My hands shook as I opened the video. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. There was a person standing beneath one of the basement windows, inside the house. I screamed and ran. I locked myself in my bedroom and called my dad, who called the police while staying on the line with me. I could barely speak. My teeth were chattering so hard I thought I'd crack one. That's when the banging started, heavy impacts against the basement door, one after another. Whoever was down there was trying to get upstairs. I sat on my bed, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the sound echo through the house. Then it stopped. The police arrived minutes later. They searched the basement, the yard, the surrounding houses. The man was gone. He'd escaped through the same window he came in through. But something was missing. Several things, actually. And when the officers checked the kitchenette, one of them went quiet. The largest knife from the rack was gone. The police stayed longer than I expected. 2 officers searched the basement again, slower this time, opening every cabinet and shining their flashlights into places I didn't even know existed. Another officer walked through the yard with my dad when he arrived, pointing at the window and explaining how easily it could be forced from the outside. They kept asking me the same questions. How long had I been alone? Had I heard anything earlier? Was I sure I didn't know the person? I kept saying no, because I didn't. But something about that answer didn't feel true. The knife bothered them the most. It wasn't just missing. The rack itself had been shifted slightly, like someone had taken their time choosing. The officer explained it calmly, professionally, but I could hear the concern underneath his voice. This wasn't random, he said. He wasn't just stealing. That night, I didn't sleep. My parents stayed home after that, canceling their trip. My sister never came over, and I never asked her why. The house felt smaller now, every room connected by the same fear. Over the next few days, more things went missing from the basement. Old blankets, a backpack no one recognized, food from the kitchenette pantry. The police said it was likely someone using the basement as a temporary shelter. Someone who'd been watching the house long enough to know when it would be empty. That idea terrified me more than anything else, because it meant he hadn't just shown up that night. He'd been nearby, watching. A week later, the police came back. They said they'd found fingerprints on the window frame. They didn't match anyone in the system. That should have been reassuring. It wasn't. School felt pointless after that. I couldn't focus. Every noise made me flinch. At night, I slept with my bedroom light on and a chair wedged under the door handle, even though my parents told me I was safe. One evening, my dad sat next to me on the couch. He asked if I remembered anything else. I hesitated. Then I told him something I hadn't mentioned before. When I watched the video on my phone, the man wasn't facing the window. He was facing the stairs, like he knew exactly where I was. My dad didn't respond right away. He just nodded and told me I'd done the right thing by calling for help. A month passed. Then 2. Nothing else happened. No more noises, no more missing items. The basement window was replaced. The locks were upgraded. Life slowly tried to return to normal, but something never sat right with me. One afternoon, while helping my mom clean, I found my old phone in a drawer, the same phone I'd used to record the basement video. I turned it on out of curiosity. The video was still there. I watched it again for the first time in years, and that's when I noticed something new. Just before the clip ended, the flashlight caught a reflection in the glass. A second figure, standing behind the first one. I turned the phone off immediately. I never showed it to anyone. Not the police, not my parents. Some things are worse when they're explained. I'm in my 30s now, and I still don't like basements. I still listen for tapping sounds at night, and I still wonder what would have happened if I'd gone down those stairs instead of filming the dark. Because whoever was in my basement that night wasn't alone. I was 16 when this happened. At that age, you think you know your house. You grow up inside it. You learn every sound, every creak, every harmless noise that happens in the middle of the night. That's why it took me so long to realize something was wrong. My parents' house was big, bigger than it needed to be for a family of 3. From the outside, it looked normal. Clean lawn, white siding, nothing that hinted at how strange it felt once you were inside. The strangest part was the basement. It was fully finished and easily the largest room in the house. A sectional couch, a big TV, a couple of storage rooms in the back with heavy doors that stayed closed most of the time. My parents preferred the living room upstairs, which meant the basement was basically mine. That's where I spent most of my time. There was also my cat. His name was Rocky, and he was aggressively affectionate. He followed people from room to room, demanded attention, and scratched at doors when he was shut out. Because of that, my parents locked him in the basement every night before they went to bed. At least, that was the routine. There was one more thing about the basement that matters. There was a door that led directly into the garage. It was supposed to be convenient, for groceries, for storage, for normal things. For me, it was convenient for sneaking people in. That Friday night, I had invited my girlfriend over. Her name was Madeline. My parents were upstairs, already winding down for the night. We went to the basement to watch TV and hang out, keeping the volume low. I assumed Rocky was already down there. It wasn't a conscious thought, it was just automatic. It was late, and that's where he always was. About 15 minutes in, I heard a noise from one of the storage rooms, a faint rustling, like cardboard shifting. Madeline tensed up immediately. "It's just my cat," I said without hesitation. And honestly, that made perfect sense. Rocky loved climbing into boxes. He knocked things over all the time. The sound fit him perfectly. A few minutes passed. Then it happened again. A soft thud. Something being moved. Madeline looked at me. "He's probably bored," I said, forcing a laugh. We went back to pretending to watch the movie, but the noises didn't stop. Every few minutes there was another rustle, another dull bump. Each time it sounded like it came from a slightly different spot. That should have bothered me. But familiarity is dangerous. When you expect a sound, your brain fills in the explanation before logic can catch up. Then we heard scratching. It came from the door at the top of the basement stairs, the door that led into the main part of the house. I froze. I knew that sound. That was Rocky. He scratched like that when he wanted in, which meant he wasn't in the basement with us, which meant whatever we'd been hearing for the last half hour was not my cat. I didn't say anything right away. I was trying to convince myself I was wrong, that maybe my parents had just let him out early, that there was some explanation that didn't involve what my mind was starting to suggest. Madeline screamed. She was pointing behind me toward the back of the basement. I turned slowly. A foam football rolled across the floor. It hadn't fallen. It hadn't bounced. It rolled smoothly, like it had just been thrown from the storage room. There was someone back there. I didn't see them. The back of the basement was darker, the light barely reaching the doorway. But there was no other explanation. Someone had been watching us. The entire time. I grabbed Madeline's arm and ran. We hit the stairs hard, taking them 2 at a time. I slammed the basement door shut behind us and locked it, careful not to let Rocky slip past. Madeline was crying. I was shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. My parents came running. Words spilled out of me in no order. Someone was in the basement. We heard them. We saw something move. My dad didn't hesitate. He called the police. While we waited, I stood on the back deck, staring at the garage door. If whoever was down there tried to escape, that was the only way out. I didn't blink. The police arrived quickly. They searched the basement, the storage rooms, the garage, every corner. They found nothing. No broken locks, no open windows, no signs of forced entry. One officer suggested the intruder must have slipped out through the garage before they arrived. I told him that was impossible. I had been watching the entire time. He nodded politely, but I could tell he didn't believe me. Because from the outside, there was no way anyone had been there. The police left after 40 minutes. They were polite, professional, thorough. But there was a tone shift toward the end. The kind that happens when adults decide a teenager is exaggerating something he doesn't fully understand. No signs of forced entry, no disturbed windows, nothing missing. They said it was probably a misunderstanding. A sound echoing through the basement, the football rolling because of an uneven floor. I knew better. After they left, my parents tried to act normal, but the house felt different. The basement door stayed locked for the rest of the night. Rocky wasn't allowed down there again. Madeline went home early. She didn't sleep that night. Neither did I. Over the next few days, I tried to make sense of it. I went back into the basement during the day, opening every storage room, checking behind shelves, moving boxes. Everything was exactly where it had been, except one thing: the foam football. It was back in the storage room, standing upright. I asked my parents if they'd moved it. They said no. I stopped going into the basement after that. Weeks passed. Nothing else happened, but the silence felt wrong, like something unfinished. My parents eventually unlocked the basement again, convinced whatever we thought we heard was nothing. I never felt comfortable down there again. Years later, when I was home from college, I asked my dad about that night. I wanted to know if he believed me. He didn't answer right away. Then he told me something he hadn't mentioned before. When the police searched the basement, one of the storage room doors wouldn't open at first. It wasn't locked. It just wouldn't budge. They pushed harder, and when it finally opened, the door frame cracked slightly along the edge. There was nothing inside, but the wood was scratched, deep gouges on the inside of the door, marks that looked like someone had been pulling it shut. From the inside. I asked him why he never told me. He said some things are better left alone. I'm an adult now. I live alone. I have my own place. And sometimes, when I visit my parents' house, I still look at that basement door, because no one ever left through the garage, and whatever was in that storage room never wanted to be seen.